Hi everyone, and welcome back to Figma Beginner to Master course, the course where you learn how to become a Figma master and an amazing designer in no time. As usual, you've got our exercise files in the description below, so feel free to follow along. Let's get started. Today we're going to talk about shapes and the design panel. The design panel is where you're going to spend most of your time as a designer, so you should get to know it really well and understand all the basic things that you can do on there. First off, let's just get familiar with the shapes we have available for us with Figma. Now, Figma gives us a shape tool here in the top bar, and you can see rectangle, line, arrow, ellipse, polygon, star. Most of these will be able to edit them even more using either the design panel or on the canvas itself. So let's just drop a rectangle in. You can get to the rectangle tool either from the toolbar or by clicking R on your keyboard. Now I have this rectangle tool. I can put a rectangle in two ways. I can click and drag, or what I can do is, again, I'm going to click R and I can just click in. When you click in while you have a shape tool selected, you get a 100 by 100 pixel shape straight away. That's amazing. So let's start looking at our design panel first of all. So at the top, we've got the selection between the different panels, you know, the design, prototype, inspect, and then we've got some alignment tools, which we'll go into in a second. But right beneath that, we've got the little transform panel at the top, where we've got the X, the Y, the W, and the H. In Figma, if you have any of these little, sections where you can type into them, you can always hover over the letter, and then you'll be able to scroll backwards and forwards for the X, for the Y, for the W, for the H. Also, top tip, anywhere that you can type into Figma responds to math. So for example, if right now the width is 100, but I need it to be, a third smaller, I can just divide that by 3. Boom, and Figma does the work for us, which is amazing. So from here, you can do the X and the Y position, the width, the height, and then you can change the angle. And you can, for the rectangle, you can give it rounded corners, which you could do from here. So say I want to give it 20 rounded corners. Next to it, you've got a little button that gives you independent corners. So I can make a really, funky shape like that. Cool. Now next to, I'm just going to Command Z so I get a rectangle again. So after the width and the height, I've got a button that's called Constrain Proportions. Now what Constrain Proportions will do is it will look at the ratio between the current width and height of the object and maintain that ratio if anything changes. Let me show you. If I click on that, 100 to 100 is a 1-to-1 ratio, right? So that gives us a square. So if I change this to 50, the height will automatically change to 50 as well. If I unconstrain this for a second, and if we had like a 1-to-2 ratio, if I change that now, see, it will change accordingly. Really important to note, I'm going to make this a square again, so 200 by 200. This only works if you use the design panel. So if I now go ahead in the canvas, I can change it, and the constraints proportions button doesn't really care that I did that, yeah? So we now know the transform panel really well. We know how to work that. Done. Everything you can do from the transform panel, you can do from the canvas as well. So I can grab my, my square, I can move it around, and then you see the X and Y changing. I can make the rotation, I can change this. And if you zoom in, you'll get these little handles, and you can even change the corner radius. Yeah, right now it's broken up, so I'm changing one at a time. But if I kind of make sure that they're all the same, then the little handle will control all of them together. Little trick for you to do that constraint proportion and help you kind of move it around in a bit of a smoother way is using some keyboard shortcuts. So right now, if I want to move it in a straight line, it's quite difficult for me. You see, I'm kind of moving it around. But if I hold down Shift, you see the Y in the design panel isn't changing, okay? Because it's going in a straight line. Same if I go up and down. And you can see I get that little arrow next to my mouse as well. If I hold down Shift while making it larger or smaller, you can see that the proportions stay the same and it constrains them like the button. And when I rotate, if I hold down Shift while doing that, it will rotate in 15-degree increments. Okay, so Shift is a really powerful key in this situation because it helps you kind of do everything a little bit smoother. Another one to know is Option or Alt if you're using PC. If you hold down Alt, it will grow from both sides the same. Some people like to call this grow from center. So if I hold down Alt or Option and Shift at the same time, you see how my rectangle kind of grows from the center? It's because it's growing from all sides at the same time. So we now know these. You have them here as well to kind of let you know what are our shortcuts that we can use, which is great. Let's have a look at some other shapes. So I'm just going to make this one a bit smaller and let's grab some more shapes. Let's look at the ellipse tool. So if we go here in our shapes and we get an ellipse tool, or we click on O on our keyboard, again, if we just click, it will create an 100 by 100 pixel circle, which is great for us. Now we can already see that if we zoom in, we've got one little handle here, and if we hover over it, will be the arc handle. I want you to look at the design panel when I do this. Straight away when I kind of invoke that arc, I'm getting 3 new sections in my design panel in the little transform section. So this is the arc tool, and I will get the sweep, which is this one. I will get the start, and I will get the ratio. Yeah, so you can create really funky shapes with this, and also it's great to know that you can really set these to exact numbers, and they're kind of like percentages. I want it to start from 0, 75%, and I want 50% ratio. I'll get this really cool shape, and if I add like little rounded corners, it even makes it really nice to look at. And you can use this for charts or graphing or anything like that, especially because you can just put those real percentages in there. So that's super useful. Let's look at our next shape. Let's look at a polygon. So you'll notice this looks like a triangle, but it's not a triangle, it's a polygon. The reason for that is, and you get a little hint for that from the bounding box. So the bounding box is this kind of blue square around it. See that there's loads of shape available here, right? Now, the reason for that is we have 2 handles showing up currently. The top handle gives us the ratio like we had before, but the bottom handle gives us a count. So you can add more sides to this polygon. That's why it's not just a triangle. You can also do it from the design panel. You see right now it's just 3 points, but I can change it to 15. Okay, and that's why the bounding box needs to be big. Quick tip for you, if you want the bounding box to be just the size of the triangle and you don't need it to be a full-on like dynamic polygon, you can just vectorize this, which you will do by flattening it, which you can either right click on flatten or just Command E. And then you see the bounding box becomes this size, and I don't have the handles anymore because it's now just a vector shape. I'll just Command Z that, so I have my nice little polygon. The last shape we have is the star, and the star is kind of a combination of everything we've seen. We've got the handle at the top, which gives us the rounded corners. We've got one here to change the count of the number of spikes, and one here to give us the ratio going in and out. And again, you can control all of this from the design panel as well. If you double click on any of the shapes, you will get into an advanced editing mode, and in that mode you can add points, remove points, change the curves. You can do really fun advanced things. If you are familiar with this and this is what you need in your design process, then just know that Figma also has that layer available to you. Now we've learned how to make these shapes look really funky and do some cool things to them, but let's see how we give them some color, some effects, some borders. So you do all that a bit further down in the design panel. I'm going to click on R on my keyboard and just drop in an 100 by 100 pixel square. Let's look at fill. Now right now our fill color is D9, D9, D9. But if we tap on that little color square, we get this. Now this is our color picker. So you can pick in so many different ways, as you can do with everything in Figma. You can either just select a color from here, you can type in a hex, an RGB, CSS, HSL, HSB, so many different ways to select a color. You can also go up here, and then you've got the option for a linear gradient, you can have a radial gradient, you can have an angular gradient, you could do so much. Quick tip with gradients, if you have a few different gradient colors in here and you want to spread them equally, all you need to do is double click on one of them and it will just spread them across equally, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to select a solid color. I'm just going to go for a nice shade of blue here. Now you can see in the fill section of the design panel, I've got my color, I've got the hex number of my color, and I've got the opacity. So if I change it to 50, for example, you can see it became more see-through and more transparent. And you can see that kind of on the actual color as well. I've got a plus here, which means I can add another color on top of it. So you can add color on top of color on top of color. You can make a gradient on top. You can also add an image or a video, and you can really play around with loads of different things with your fill colors. And you can also change them, so you can move the top one to the bottom. Top tip, if you want to eyedrop and get the exact fill color from somewhere else, you can just click on I on your keyboard and you'll get that eyedropper tool straight away, and that will select your fill color. You can also reach it inside of the fill color picker right here. Now we've got our fill color selection. Let's move on to selecting a stroke. Now, stroke is just a fancy design way of saying border. I'm going to add a stroke over here, and the color selection is exactly the same. You click on the color, you get the color picker. I'm going to stay with a black one. Now I've got this little drop down between center, inside, and outside, and you can really see the difference when it's bigger. So I'm just going to say I want a really big stroke here. Then if I switch to outside, you can see how it goes on the outside of the shape, and you see the bounding box is inside of the stroke even. If I go inside, it's inside, and center will kind of just give me that little in between. I'm going to stay on inside for now. So I'm just going to change that to inside and give it maybe 2 pixels width. Now I'm just going to zoom in so you can see it. Over here you can see you can control the strokes per side, which is pretty new to Figma. I'm just going to go custom here, and I can say 5 on this side, 5 on the top, and then 1, 1. Okay, so again, you can create these really cool things. I especially like this when you're creating like a little table or something, and then you can just have the bottom one set to 2, and it creates that little separator at the bottom. So that's a really neat little trick. If I'm just going to use them for all of them the same for now, you've got these 3 little dots. Now you see these advanced 3 little dots in a lot of sections in our design panel, and they just give you extra options. So if I'll click on them now, I can see I can change it to a dashed line, and I have loads of more controls here for my dashed line. I can change the joints, I can change the dash cap. So there's really a lot you can do with your stroke to make it look great. And just like before, you can add multiple strokes onto your object. Let's move on to effects. We've got 4 different kinds of effects. So if I add an effect, the first one that will come up is drop shadow. And next to drop shadow, we've got this little sun icon, which is the effect settings. If I click into that, you can see I can change the blur. I can change the direction of the drop shadow. I can even change the color of the drop shadow. And you can do some really nice things with this. I can change this as well to inner shadow, and that just gives the shadow inside of the shape rather than outside of the shape, which can again give you some really nice effects for objects if you want them. We've got a layer blur, which just blurs the layer itself. And then we've got background blur. Now background blur, if you look at it, does not affect the item itself. I believe you need to have a little bit of opacity for it to work in general. But if I put another square behind it, and you see I'm gonna make sure that it's underneath this one, what it does is it's supposed to give you some sort of blur to the background. Do you see? So it's not, my square itself is not blurred, but what's behind it is what's blurring. It's a bit of a weird one, but use it if you need it. While we have 2 things happening on top of each other, I'm just going to jump back into this layer section. Now, the layer section will give you blend modes, and blend modes again are for your use if you're more of a visual designer, graphic designer, less if you're just doing UX UI work, but it's great to know that they exist, and it's nice to play around with them and see what they do and how they affect your layer. So the blend mode that will usually be set as a default is pass through, but let's just see if we use multiply, or if we use lighten, or if we use color dodge. Yeah, so blend modes usually only affect a shape if there's something behind it, because again it's the relationship between those 2 colors that's happening. For example, color burn, so you completely change the color. Multiply gave you that kind of dark screen look to the background. Soft light, hard light. So you can play around with these, and they again can give you really cool things if you want them. If you are designing something that is going into development later for a mobile app or for a website, just be cautious with this, because you can't always replicate it later on when you're actually developing yourself, or if someone else is doing the development work for you. So just keep that in mind. The blend modes in the layers section on the design panel affect the entire object, but I'm just going to bring it back to pass through and show you that when you're selecting your fill color, for example, you have this shape here, which is another kind of level of blend mode. So you can add a color on top of a color and have a blend mode just on one of them. But again, explore this if this is something that you feel would be useful for you, but if not, don't worry about it. The last bit of our design panel is the export section, and there you can export the shape that you just made, or the frame, or anything really, into SVG, JPG, anything that you need it to be. So let's have a look at that. If I select my shape here and I click on the plus on the export section, I'm going to get this little thing that is giving me options for exporting it. So right now you see it says export rectangle 134. That's not a very indicative name, so I'm just going to change it and call it my square. See, that's chained already. So first of all, we can select the type. We can make it a PNG and JPG, SVG, PDF even. We can do whatever we want with it. I'm going to keep it as a PNG. I can select if you want it to grow. So right now it's 100 by 100, but if I export it at 2 times, it's going to export as 200 by 200. And sometimes you want to design a bit small, but then export bigger, so it's a bit better quality or anything like that. But that will make the file size bigger as well. We can then add a suffix, so it will call it my square, and then the suffix will be added as well. And we can do some more things in here, ignore overlapping layers. You can also decide that the fill color is not in the export. There's all kinds of things you can do. And you can see a little preview of what's going to be exported. So if I select both of these together, for example, and select export, it's going to export them as 2 separate layers. But if I group them and click on export, it's going to group them together. Top tip, another way of exporting items together without having to group them is using the slice tool. So I'm going to go up to my toolbar where my frame tool is, and select slice. I'm then going to just create a slice around the items that I want to export together. So it's kind of just called slice 1. I'm going to call it my squares. So this just looks at anything that's inside of that slice, and they're not grouped. I can move them around together. I can't really even select this slice. The only way to select it is from the layers panel. And I can't do anything to it, as you can see here, but I can select export, and then that will export anything that it sees inside of the slice. It kind of just like slices your design file, your canvas, and just gets that bit out. So I'm going to export this. So you see, I get just a normal file picker that you would on your computer, and you can save your item there as whatever you wanted it to be. Top tip, you will learn this with Figma a lot, but anywhere that you have a slash will automatically create a folder where there is some sort of filing system. So for example, if I want my squares to be saved inside of a new folder, what I can do is I can just name it. I'm going to name it folder and then slash my squares. And now when I export this, it's going to automatically create that little folder for you, as you can see. So I've got the squares that I exported earlier, and then I've got the same ones inside of a folder called folder, because that's how I called it in my design panel when I exported. So we've spoken about the transform section at the top, the layer, fill, stroke, effect, and export. Let's jump back into the top of our design panel and look a bit at the alignment tools. Now, alignment tools are super powerful tools, and people really don't use them enough. They make your life so much easier. Instead of having to drag things, they just make everything look so clean and nice when everything is just lined up, distributed equally, and aligned. Let's have a look at how you can play around with them. So I have this shape here that is just, a bit weird. And what you can do is, I want them to be kind of squared up, I want them to be aligned to each other. So I could just drag this little shape up until I get those lines that show me that I've snapped to another item, and move it. Or I could just use my alignment tools. I'm just going to Command Z to bring it back. If I select both of these items, I can go up to the alignment tools and say align top. Yeah, and you can use Option or Alt W as well. When I click on that, it will look at the shape that is the furthest to the extreme of that direction. So if I'm aligning to the top, it's going to look at who's more to the top. I'm going to align to that one. Yeah, so it's not going to align to the bottom one, it's going to align to the top one. So if I click on that, straight away, they kind of snapped to each other. I'm going to do the same with this one and this one, and just snap them to the right, and then snap these to the left, and snap these two to the bottom. Amazing, right? That just gave us this really neat square, and I did it with just a few clicks without having to drag it and move it around. Okay, now you can align multiple items. You can align 4, 5, 17 items to each other. It just makes it so nice. Now these 4 little guys are sat inside of this box, this green box, which is a frame, which we'll talk about in a different session, but the frame is essentially containing them, so they're inside of that frame. Now I'm just going to make it a bit smaller for a second. If I select these 4 items, just going to hold down Shift while I'm selecting them. I'm going to move them here. I want them to be at the center of this box, So what I could do is, if I select them and I try and use my align tools to align center and align center, they're just going to align centrally to themselves, like in relation to the other ones. So that's not really what I wanted. I'm just going to Command Z and Command Z. I want them to be in the middle of the parent that they sit in the middle of the box container that they are in. So the way to do that is I could group them, right? And then horizontal center, vertical center, because that will center them to the container that they're in. But Figma gives us a quick way to do this without having to group them. If I hold down Shift, you can see that the align tools get a little border around them. And now I'm aligning these as a group. So you see, if I don't have it clicked, it will say align horizontal centers. If I have it with Shift, it says align horizontally as a group. So if I just do that, you see it will align them as a group. It will look at them as one item and align them to the parent that they are in. Now we also have distribution tools. For example, if I look at these 4 little images here of people, if I select them, and now I want to just distribute them equally. You see these 2 are close, these are far away, these are far away. I can go into these advanced sections here and I say distribute horizontal spacing. Now the spacing between them is equal, and I even have a little thing here that tells me what that spacing is. I can change it, let's say, to 30. I'm just going to Command Z for a second, and you can do the same thing. I'm going to select these 3. You could do the same thing on the vertical spacing as well. What if I need to align them on both axes at the same time, and I don't want to distribute horizontally and then vertically and then center and then center? I just want to do it all at once. So what I can do is use a tool called Tidy Up. Now I'm going to select all of my items together, and when I hover over the little bounding box I've created, I get this little button here. Sometimes you won't see this button, you might need to zoom in to get to it, but you can always reach it from the align section in the design panel. So in the more options, I've got Tidy Up, and I'm just going to select it. Now see what that did quickly. It snapped everyone into this little matrix, and you get both of these appear here as well. It's telling me right now there's 10 pixel spacing on the vertical scale, and there's 23 pixels in between each item on the horizontal scale. And I can really play around and change that. Also, like we always say in Figma, you can do anything in multiple different ways. So if I zoom in a tiny bit, you can see these little pink lines appear, and they let you control the spacing in the canvas as well. And notice they're all going to respond exactly the same. So while using Tidy Up, none of them can break the mold. I can just select one and move it, but if I want to stay in this Tidy Up mode, I'm moving all of them together. A little top tip when doing selection in Figma. So Figma, as we know, is a layers tool. So I've got all these layers here, and sometimes when I need to get to something, I'm going to need to double click a lot. So I'm just going to collapse all of my layers for a second to show you what I mean by that. I'm going to click on Alt and L, and that will just collapse everything like you just saw. So if I want to get into this little shape over here, let's see how many times I have to click in order to get there. So I'm going to click once, I'm in the canvas. I'm going to click again, double click, and I'm in the box. And I'm going to double click again, and I've got this corner. But let me just collapse everything again. Option L. If I want to get straight into it and do a deep selection, I just hold down Command, and you see how I already have like a little highlight around it, and I click on it and I've deep selected through all those layers just by holding down Command. So if I want to select a bunch of items together by dragging and doing this, I would recommend holding down Command, and that kind of gives you that deep selection while hovering over with your bounding box to find whatever you want to deep select. The last thing I want to talk about is images and some plugins that you can use to help you populate images in a really quick way. So I'm going to select my rectangle tool and just get about like a 200 by 200 pixel square in here, so it's a bit big. I'm going to click on my fill, I'm going to select image, and then just browse for any image that you have on your computer. I'm going to go for Cat 3 over here. So when I select it, you can see that it's an image. I now have an image over here in the layers panel. But if I select it, you can see there's different kind of modes for how it will fill or fit the image itself. You might be familiar with this from other design tools or anything that handles images really. But if I select, let's say, fit, see, it will fit that photo into the shape, regardless of what the shape kind of size is. So it's going to look at the widest bit and just like fit that in. I can also crop it, which will give me these kinds of selections. You can see the blue is what you are going to see from the image. I'm just going to Command Z, but there is a black line around the image. I can also move the image around and make the image actually longer or bigger or anything like that. So I can control what I see, but I can also control the image itself. And I can tile. So tile will bring the image to its real size, as you can see here. And again, I can make it a bit smaller. And then you see I just get loads and loads and loads of cats. And it depends on what you need. Sometimes you need fit and you need to swap it around. Sometimes you just need fill. Sometimes, let's say I just need to see the head. So I'll click on crop, and then holding down shift, I will just make this center it here. Yeah, so it really depends what you need your image to do. But that's kind of how you play around with it. And then you've got all of these effects on here. You can change the contrast, you can change the saturation, change the temperature. You know, there's all these fancy things that you can do with it. Ooh, psychedelic cat. So I'm just going to leave this lovely little cat here. I'm going to drop in a few different rectangles, and we're going to play around with adding multiple images. I'm just going to click on R. Click in, we get 100 by 100, and we're going to copy it. I can copy it by holding down Alt and dragging. I can Command D to duplicate, and I can Command C, Command V to just get a new one. Yeah, I just need 3. If I tap on a shortcut, which is Command Shift K, I'm going to get my folder selector, and I can select any images that I want, and those images will kind of be loaded onto my pointer, and then I can place them in my file. So if I just load these 3 cats, you see now I have that little shape on my pointer. And if I click on this rectangle, you see it gets highlighted. It kind of populates those cats here. Now, one thing to know, if I'm just going to select one of these cats again, if I have one loaded on and I don't select a shape, I can also just drop it in, but it will just drop it in randomly into the space. Whereas if I select a shape, it will contain it within that shape. The default is fill. And not fit. Sometimes fit is what you want, but fill just gives it, you know, it fills the shape that you've given it, so it creates that consistency between everything. So that's one little tip. Another one is using plugins. Now, you may not be familiar with plugins, but plugins are kind of these open source things where anyone can create a plugin, and it's usually a really helpful tool to do something. I'm going to create 3 more squares here. I'm just going to hold down Alt and Shift to drag in a straight line and duplicate. And if I select these 3, I'm going to introduce you to a plugin that I really love called Content Reel. You get to plugins on the resources tool, which is between the text tool and the hand tool in the tab bar. I just click on that, plugins, and then I'm going to search for Content Reel. So when I run it, Content Reel is basically a massive repository of loads of different text, loads of images, anything like that. It just lets you drop them in. So it allows you to design without having to find real content. It gives you dummy content for your use. So if I go to images, I have my shape selected, and let's just say avatar's female. See, it just gives me 3 images. Avatar's male, avatars, photos, logos. Yeah, so it's got so much stuff in here that you can use. And again, sometimes when you design, you have already everything you need to put in the real data, the real images, but most of the time you're kind of creating a fake thing in your design and using just dummy input. But it's nice to have these images available to you to use, so you don't need to go and Google it or find it and save it or source it. You just use these. Another really good plugin is Unsplash. You might be familiar with it. It's very big online. But if I drop in a rectangle over here, and then I go to resources and type in Unsplash. So with Unsplash, you can search for something specific that you want. I'm just going to search for, let's say, horse. And just search for that, and I get loads of images of horses. And again, you can filter it by relevance, orientation, anything like that. You're going to select this, and you see it brings it in straight away. So those are the 2 plugins that I kind of use on a daily basis, but I'm sure there's so many more out there because there's thousands of plugins available on Figma. So we've gone through everything you need to know about the design panel as a beginner with Figma, using shapes, exporting, making fancy effects, and using the align tools to really make your design super sleek and clean. I hope you enjoyed, and see you at the next one.